So now that we do have our quorum of two, the chair is seeking a motion to adopt the agenda.
Sir Chair, I so motion that we adopt the agenda.
All right, I second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved.
No, brother, I'm good.
Chair is seeking a motion to, does everyone have a chance to read the previous minutes?
Being the fact that I am not a member of this committee, I have not read the previous minutes. But if you make them available, I'll review as soon as possible.
There you go. There it is.
Okay, let me see.
So we'll just take a moment as a director watch you skims through the minutes for the previous meeting.
Okay, we're good.
Awesome. The chair is seeking a motion to accept the previous minutes.
I so motion to accept the previous minutes of the Education Accountability Committee meeting. What is the date? I'm sorry.
I believe it was February 10th. Let me double. Yeah, February 10th.
For February 10th.
I second. Any unreadiness? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved. We'll move on to item 4.0, discussion items. 4.1, Apple devices refresh lease.
Okay.
All right. Good evening. I did share this with the Finance Committee last night, and it was approved for consent to the board for tomorrow's meeting. But I did want to go ahead and share with the Education Accountability Committee meeting as well, because it is a CNI adoption, and it is related to pre-K through 12 instruction. And in short, this is our device refresh. It is basically a majority of our iPads at the elementary buildings and early childhood are at the end of life status and need to be refreshed to provide students a stable device experience. And the majority of the devices at our buildings will not be able to be updated to the latest iOS operating system after this school year. They have minimum storage capacity and just really need to be upgraded. In addition, the devices used by the students at the middle school will be upgraded to MacBooks. And so part of this refresh would be to upgrade the iPads at the middle school to MacBooks and move the middle school iPads down to the elementary buildings. The approved instructional technology plan was to provide for one-to-one technology district-wide for all elementary and secondary students. This proposal would ensure that there's adequate space for all the resources and textbooks, providing unique experience for students, critical thinking, collaboration. It also provides an opportunity to use all of our existing iPad Airs and the 32 gigs and 64 gigs at the elementary level and provide MacBooks for all of our secondary students. This would then also provide a one-to-one ratio for all of our students, including pre-K. And this would be the first time that our pre-K students would be one-to-one. So we're really excited about that. The total amount is for a 48-month lease for the Apple devices. We also get laptop carts, cases for the iPads, and that amount would not exceed $1,665,000. The annual cost for the lease would be approximately $417,000. This would all be paid out of our district capital lease funds. And that includes the third-party vendor dollar amount for the cases and protective shells for the MacBooks. The estimated cost for that is $65,000. And the dollar amount for the MacBooks and iPads and charging carts is $1,597,200. $298.50. And so I shared that the recommendation was the approval for a 4-year lease with Apple for all of the devices and storage, and charging for when the devices are in the classrooms. This lease would also provide the 2,600 iPads for the elementary students that need to be refreshed, the ones that we cannot update. And then the remaining iPad quantity needed at the elementary level would be transferred from Smith Hale to the elementary schools. And so, and I talked about the protective cases. And so the total lease, including the MacBooks, iPads, and cases, would not exceed the $1,665,000.
This is an awesome idea, I believe. Having children in the district at the elementary level. I see that storage does run out rather quickly. I was looking at the model the other day, and I was like, these are a little bit older. And I figured soon enough, especially with the update that came out on last Friday, that they might not be able to take the latest updates. So I was just thinking about this and talking to my wife about it the other day. So this is something that was already on the front of my mind, and I greatly appreciate you having the foresight to be ahead of this. I do have a question. What would be the price if we comparatively if we just purchase outright as opposed to lease?
I don't have that information, but I can get that for you. I do know that given our history and all of the support that's been provided through Apple when we have the lease, which covers when we have damages done and things of that nature, it really is cost benefit. It is a cost benefit for us to have the lease. Dr. Skinner, do you know a little bit more about that?
I can address that.
Yeah.
Basically, that price is the price. It's just they break it out over 4 years for us. With, if you look at, it's like a 0.25% interest on it. So basically, we're purchasing it. They're breaking it up over 4 years for us because, for one, we couldn't really want to take a hit of $1,600,000.
Right.
So what we've done is we have a series of Apple leases, and when one comes off, it's time to refresh with another because we kind of cycle through. So we can't really afford to replace everything at once, and so everything's on a cycle. So it's really the same cost, whether, you know, and again, the lease is a lease purchase. So when we finish the lease, we will own the devices.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense, and you have my support in moving this on to the board tomorrow. Director Watch, do you have any input on that?
No, sir. I gave all my input last night. I think if I can share, I like the motion that it does get taken to consent items. I motion that this recommendation is taken to consent items for the full board. Go ahead.
Watry, or Director Watry, I'm not sure if we really need to do that because it was placed on consent from finance last night.
That's
this
what
is
I thought.
Really just more from informational.
Perfect. That's why, just covering my bases, sir.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Franklin.
Thank you again, Ms. Franklin.
Thank you.
That is, now this must be yours, Director Abram, because I'm not really familiar with it.
Yes. So with the supplemental school, this is more of a conversation piece that I wanted to have. And it may be, you know, could plant some seeds. Maybe, I'm sure these conversations have already happened within the leadership team. But with the school closures, the uncertainty with our recent pandemic of COVID-19, we're not sure what school will look like next year. We know our students won't be back in the buildings this year. And they're just not they're receiving a quality education through Hickman Mills School District still, but it's not the same. We don't really have that assurance that the students are getting the instructional direction with it kind of not being facilitated by teachers. And so with the students potentially being out of school 5 months, 6 months maybe, I was wondering if there are any contingency plans for like a supplementary school where we could offer school start, like a late summer school where school could start early August if the pandemic is over. Then if we could offer a school, you know, in early August before school normally starts, that these students could kind of catch up, get refreshed, get acclimated to going to school again. I know we can't make it, I'm sure we can't make it mandatory, but still just offer a supplementary kind of experience to get them back in the rhythm, back in the groove, refresh on things from last school year that, we typically have a little loss over summer anyway. I anticipate that loss being even greater, being out for so long. So just a way to kind of get our kids prepared for the academic year starts.
And I'll let Ms. Franklin chime in just a second, with what we're discussing, because again, a lot of it is we're discussing what summer school may look like. But one of the things is with the new law going into effect, we can't start school next school year. I think it's 14 days prior to Labor Day. We can't go beyond that, so we can't start too early in August. But that's not to say that there's not a possibility of a late summer school or something like that. And I'll let Ms. Franklin kind of chime in and talk about that for a minute.
So right now, because the state is really just trying to figure out what next steps will look like, the big conversation is when will we be able to have summer school and what will summer school look like? Typically, summer school would be offered in June. And now it's my understanding that because of the situation involving virtual learning, there's also a conversation about how do districts recoup funds. And from what we've heard, districts would not be able to recoup funds from summer school unless summer school started July 1. And so that's kind of what we're looking at, having a July summer school, just following guidance from the state if that's what they are directing us to do. And it would more than likely be a virtual summer school session. Again, this is just contingent upon whether or not we can actually have face-to-face contact, which is leaning towards not being able to do that in July. And so if that's the case, we would have a virtual summer school session to accommodate just kind of this gap in time where kids have not been in school. I mean, there's several options that we would try to consider, and some of that would be how do we start the school year? Typically, we'd start the school year one way. We may look at starting the school year, revisiting some of the standards that students didn't necessarily receive face-to-face instruction on, and giving students an opportunity to get some of that type of enrichment. Obviously, that's just a discussion because clearly students will be in the next grade. And so that would be a 4th grade standard. Now they're in the classroom with a 5th grade teacher. What does that look like? Looking at other enrichment opportunities where kids could receive additional supplemental support via some of the supplemental resources that we have available. So it's almost like kids would be getting some enrichment standards and instruction through our supplemental resources, and classroom teachers are teaching their current grade level standards, just doing it in a manner that's not stressful or overwhelming for students. And so it really is one of those things where we have to really sit down and be strategic in our planning, because we also want to consider that we don't know what the start of the year will even look like. If we'll even have kids face-to-face, even when we start in August, we don't really know. And so we've got to plan for both. And so we'd want to do a transition that is still academic in nature, but still in support of the fact that, families are really having a hard time, and some families may be impacted in different ways by what's happening right now with the pandemic. And so we've been thinking about a lot of different ideas just to be ready. But it's just, a matter of what does it look like? Are we face-to-face or are we virtual? And so right now we're just planning for everything virtually.
I mean, you can tell that it's very early on. I mean, we just got the news last Friday that we're out for the remainder of the school year.
Yeah.
And needless to say, there are so many decisions that do need to be made. You're right. And so we are having a lot of discussions. But again, even as we're having these discussions, it's like Ms. Franklin said, we don't know. So we have to plan for multiple opportunities. If we are brick and mortar or we are virtual, we kind of have to plan for both at this point. We can't have any hard set plans in motion yet, but what we're doing is we're kind of looking at all the possibilities.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's kind of just what I wanted to, kind of the dialogue I wanted to have, what kind of plans are in place. So you guys are, on that, on top of that, as I expected you would be. It just, man, just think about this learning gap and this all this time off. It just, man, it just kind of saddens me that they may be behind in what plans we have. And a lot of districts there weren't any contingency plans for this magnitude of a school closure, and so we're all kind of hit unexpected. So I just hate for us to get caught in the same position again. So seeing that you're planning for all kind of possibilities, as many as we can think of, that gives me great relief that we'll have something in place, no matter what this outcome or situation may be.
And again, I do understand your concerns because, I think I share them as well. But I will tell you right now, Ms. Franklin and her CNI team has rocked it out on all levels so far. I mean, the technology with instruction. I'm going to include some screenshots of some of the things that they're being on the website right now, because you're right. We have done an excellent job. We've reached 96 or 97% of all the students so far. But just because we've reached them doesn't necessarily mean they're getting that quality of learning at home. And again, to be honest, right now, there's so many things going on with so many of our families. I hate to say it, some of them may be out of job right now. And some of them may have a job and they're working from home and trying to help their students. There's so many challenges. And so again, we are just trying to make sure first and foremost that we are there to support our families, through this time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is great. It's greatly appreciated. And being involved in multiple school districts, I can kind of puff my chest and say, "Oh, we're already on that. Hickman's already ahead of that." My virtual learning, our choice boards, the work that is being done when my kids are doing their work and they're meeting their teachers almost every day. It's not once a week. They're having meetings every day and doing all kind of stuff. And we are definitely doing a really good job. At least on the elementary level, I have personal experience that we are selling on the elementary level.
It's at the secondary level too.
Hello.
Yeah, that's true.
Awesome. Well, if there's no further discussion on that, we'll move to the next item.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We're not. Let me go back. This is the handbook. Got the draft, and you've had it now for a little bit. I will say there's two things that since I shared it with you last month that I have thought about that we need to do. One I've shared with Carla is, we need to add something where the student and families say that they've read and acknowledge it and sign something to kind of make sure that, they're accountable. And so she is working on getting that, trying to see what other districts are doing and putting something like that together. The other thing I wanted to bring about is the way our handbook is set up right now. When a student is suspended, they're not allowed on any school property whatsoever. None. When they're not allowed to come to football games on a Friday night if they're suspended. They're not allowed to basically have any foot on school grounds. The concern has come up. We have some students that, when they have been suspended in past years, they were a part of Hope Hangout and they were able to go, across the street from Ruskin to Hope Hangout. Well, now Hope Hangout is located at Burke and it's on school property. So there's been a question, do we want to make an exception for students if they get suspended to come onto school property after school is out and still participate in Hope Hangout? And again, you want to make sure that everybody, gets their thoughts and we're able to discuss those two items. Because again, everything else, nothing has changed since, we brought it last month, but those two things are new.
Chair.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Chair, I have a question. So what would be the parameters in which we would have that student come into a Hope Hangout on those who are running the Hope Hangout on their end? Because it would be their exception of allowing that student to continue to participate in the Hope Hangout, being the fact that that's technically it's an agency, but it's an agency that we're facilitating on our grounds. So even with us putting something in the handbook, what would be the parameters in which Hope Hangout would put on that suspended student if they were allowed to come on and participate in Hope Hangout. Does that make sense?
I'm not 100% sure because, even though Hope Hangout is really just for our students, no other districts participate.
No, I get that, but I feel like because once we suspend the student, if the student gets suspended, then it would be up to Hope Hangout, that program, if they were going to, how that student is going to participate in the after school activities. Now, if Hope Hangout does not feel comfortable with that student being in that program per se, after school being the fact that they're suspended, then we would correlate with them. But if Hope Hangout says like, well, we still want to be able to provide resource, the availability for that student to participate even though they're suspended, the question then becomes on Hope Hangout, what parameters or what boundaries or what are you going to put in place to ensure that A, that the kids are safe, and B, that based on the fact that this person was suspended, what not so much as consequences that shouldn't play out in Hope Hangout, but what parameters are you going to take to ensure the safety and security of the students in the program?
And that is a good question. I'll be honest, one of the board members brought this concern to me. I have not had an opportunity to speak to Marvin Moses yet about it. I will make a note to make sure that I do call her tomorrow to make sure I have that answer so that when we discuss it tomorrow night during the full board, I can address that.
Because I would want her answer for that in order for us to make a determination as a board on what our handout will look like. Because if this is the only thing that the only program or after school program that might interfere with the aspect of someone being suspended and being on school grounds, then we need to address her and ask her. So when a person telling her, hey, if a student is suspended, they're not allowing them on school grounds. So if a suspended student is in Hope Hangout or has been participating in Hope Hangout, what will you do? What will you do differently for the student, or would you rather the student also not? Or would you rather us adhere to what our plans are, which is if they're suspended, they're not allowed on school grounds? It depends on her program.
Right.
The
way it is written right now, they would not be allowed. So
Okay.
Again, the way it is written right now, I want to make sure it's very clear, they would not be allowed to participate in Hope Hangout. That's why I said somebody from their board reached out wanting to make an exception.
I see.
Well,
So,
now that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the question is what is their parameters on the exception?
That I will make sure I talk to Marvin before tomorrow's night's meeting.
Okay.
So
Dr. Skinner, I'm sorry. Can you craft out what the benefits of the student participating in Hope Hangout would be? Like what benefit does the student gain by being able to do that while on suspension?
Yeah, again, I do know that, and with the Hope Hangout, there's students that definitely need that program, and it's great for our students. And before, when it was located across from Ruskin, this was not an issue because it wasn't. They were no longer on school property.
Right.
Since this program has moved earlier this semester, it now becomes an issue. And I'm, to be honest, like I said, either way, I want to make sure it's addressed because I don't want it. As we adopt a new student handbook, we want to make sure that everything, as far as a possibility, gets addressed before it goes and gets approved.
Okay, so then my only question, this is my hypothetical question then. So, and this is more for Carla. So, if a student is suspended in the handbook looks exactly how it looks now, where they're not allowed on school property, and we make the exception of allowing Hope Hangout, the student to the exemption of them being able to hang out in Hope Hangout. Should the question be to Hope Hangout if there is any disturbance or any violation of their rules, regulations, etc., us being able to know how they will address the situation with the student, because it then becomes that student's responsibility on our property. I mean, that student becomes their responsibility, but it's on our property. So, like, do you understand what I'm not trying to be confusing, but
No, and you're not being confusing. I understand exactly what you're saying. I do think that could pose an issue. You know, committing another violation on school property while the student is suspended
exactly.
creates a heightened issue from a disciplinary standpoint, from a policy standpoint. The other thing that kind of floats through my mind is, how do you it just can become more of a slippery slope in terms of allowing students to participate in on-campus activities while suspended. An exception can be made for this one, and then the question becomes, is it appropriate to make an exception for something else? And so, which is why I was asking the question, if they could articulate the benefit for students, um, the specific benefit in participating in Hope Hangout as opposed to some other after-school activity while on suspension, so that if the exception is made, it can be well crafted out, the basis for that exception.
Okay, I agree.
Okay.
That was all I got.
Okay, I mean, again, we can discuss anything else you want in the handbook, but I wanted to bring those two items
Right.
to the forefront since they were new since last month.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with that, so I'm not sure of all the benefits of Hope Hangout, so I really can't elaborate on that. Maybe some of the leadership can, but that did kind of spark another series of questions in my head that, again, could create a slippery slope that I'm not sure we want to navigate. But if we had the option of sanctioned after-school activities that could be participated in, like parent-teacher conference. If I'm suspended, can I not go to parent-teacher conference anymore?
Good.
No,
You're not supposed to be, actually.
Okay.
No, you don't. Yeah.
When you are
Okay, well,
currently, the way it is written, when you are suspended, you are not supposed to be on any school property in the district for any reason. That is the way it is written right now. And typically what happens is, if a student does go onto school property, of course, they're addressed. And depending upon if they go off property again quietly or versus they make a disturbance while they're on school property, makes a determination on next steps. Because sometimes it's just a matter of, you're on school property, here's a warning, verbal warning, and they leave with no problem. Sometimes they actually cause more of a problem, and then more discipline action has to be taken. And then if, let's say, they're on a long-term suspension and they're on school property, a lot of times then no trespass letters are issued. So it really is situational based on what happens, but under no circumstances at the moment, if a student is suspended for any reason, any length of time, are they allowed on any school property.
So yeah, Chair, I don't see a reason to touch it, but we can always have discussion.
yeah, that's like I said, we could discuss it, but that's a slippery slope that I'm not sure we want to open up that can of worms. That could lead to a level of other things.
And to be honest, I'm not necessarily advocating for it. I just know that, again, I want what's best for our students. I know it's a good program, but I also understand it is unusual. But again, when I was approached by their board member, I said I would bring it, to the committee for discussion. And I will, in response to your questions, talk with Marvin Moses and try to have a response to craft out the benefits and have some of these concerns addressed for tomorrow night, because again, it is a first reading already on the agenda for tomorrow night. So again, there's not a vote or an adoption scheduled for tomorrow. It's just the first read. The vote or adoption will be in May.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Because if anything, the only exception I can think of is if, yeah, sure, they can participate in the Hope Hangout as long as they own on property. But I don't know how that's going to work out for them.
Right.
Doing all right.
And I would just add that, I know that this is already an issue that we are dealing with. I mean, we still have students who come to school or come up to the school while on suspension. And I would imagine this is probably more prevalent at the secondary level. I've heard stories about it, but And I would hate to kind of even give the impression that there's opportunity for that. We're already trying to keep that from happening right now, where kids are still coming to school, even though they are currently on a suspension, and the principals and administration are trying to deal with those situations, because sometimes when kids come, they're coming because they're looking for another student or something like that. And so for me, I just think I wouldn't want to create a gray space for that when we're already trying to combat it as it is, and we're still having issues with that. Just to be
So, yeah. So, Chair, if I may,
Yeah.
with that information, I'm gonna say I would say that the only exception that I would, and this is me speaking personally as a single board member, the only exception I would allow would be they can participate in Hope Hangout as long as they aren't on our own property. I know that puts them in a position, but
So
essentially
how does
that's
that work?
yeah,
How do you participate in Hope Hangout not on school
not
property if that's on school property now?
Yeah.
not the district's problem. That's the problem. That's the
You know,
thing.
so yeah, I mean, we might as well just leave it as is instead of, you know, making an exception that really
I mean,
doesn't.
and to be honest, if you are dead set on it, I don't even have to talk to, Marvin Moses. I can just say we brought it up, and the committee just said no. I have no problem with that. I just thought it was my obligation
It's
to
worth
bring it to the
addressing. Yeah,
committee.
no.
Mhm.
And Dr. Skinner, I would agree with that. I would agree that it's worth us discussing because a lot of questions were brought up in this discussion right here. But this discussion has determined that it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially
So I can-
especially being the fact that we're already dealing with a lot of the issues where kids will come in with ulterior motives. And not to say that all kids will do that, but like creating a gray area creates, with us already having an issue, would only cause the more availability for issues to happen. And I don't think that's, hey, you take care. That's that wouldn't be advantageous on either party, whether it be Hope Hangout or the district, to agree to make an exception.
Agreed.
So I want to make sure I understand your direction. At the moment, there's no need for me to even do any more discussion. It's correct?
I mean, the board can discuss it. The one thing I want to make sure is that the full board is able to give that feedback. But I can't just speaking as a temporary committee member here, thinking of the district as a whole. It creates more work for you and your staff. It creates more dissonance when it comes to after school management, classroom management. Could cause an issue with violence or perpetuated violence that has continued outside of the realm of suspension or consequences that happen in the school. And I just rather would not take that risk, but I will gladly allow my fellow colleagues to try to also have the discussion amongst themselves to be able to make that determination on their own.
And
I agree.
I
I
guess
think,
my only question is, and Director Abram, do you want me to try to still address these questions with Marva Moses, or is I don't need to?
I would still like to know what she would say the benefits of Hope Hangout are. So I maybe have the conversation, but it doesn't be, I don't think, deep into or convincing or try to sway one way or another. I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, any members of the committee, that the Education Accountability Committee supports not making any changes. And so when we do have the discussion during tomorrow's board meeting, we can all be in agreement that we don't think any of a change or deviation should be made for those students attending Hope Academy, and that we all can kind of just support that in tomorrow's meeting.
Yeah.
And again, as Director Watch said, other people may have their points and want to speak their piece perfectly within their rights. But we can even draft a statement. The Education Accountability Committee supports not making any deviation for students being on property after school.
Right, and don't get me wrong, I understand. I mean, Hope Hangout does have some great benefits for our students, and I truly appreciate it. But you have to weigh the benefits, like you said, versus, the cons and the challenges if we were to make this change.
it's mainly based on the fact that the Hope Hangout provides an opportunity for our students who are doing the right things to be able to continue to do the right things. Those who have consequences for their actions, this is a part of it. And by taking away those consequences, we'll be enabling our students to continue to perpetuate behavior that got them suspended in the first place. So I think that it's beneficial to those who are suspended as well as those who are participating that we keep this the way it is, so that the consequences of actions are followed through, and that we're not enabling students to feel like they continue to perpetuate the same behavior that got them in the situation in the first place.
Agreed.
All
Is there
right.
any further discussion before we move to the next item?
No, sir.
Okay, item 5.0, future items to go to the full board. Does anyone have anything to speak to that item?
Absolutely not. I'm not usually here.
At this moment, I do not either.
Is there anything in there?
I don't think there is. Looking at the agenda, I don't see any future items that were brought on the agenda.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll move to item 6.0, future meeting dates. We have regular session board meeting tomorrow, April 16th at 5 o'clock. Policies committee is May 5th at 5:30. Facilities committee meeting is May 7th at 5:30. Finance committee, May 11th, 5:30. And the regular session board meeting will be May 21st at 6:30.
Chair, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yes.
Is the meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock or 6:30?
It says regular on the agenda says 5 o'clock.
I know, but I thought I had
So
down
that should be
6:30.
So the open session meeting starts at 6:30. Closed
Right.
session meeting starts at 5:30.
Right.
okay. So you need to have them correct that and reach out to Ms. Payton to make sure.
Well,
Invitation.
this is Cynthia. Will I need to send another Zoom? Or I guess it would be Miss Payton that would send a Zoom to the closed session meeting, correct?
Yeah, I have a
Correct.
Zoom invite for the regular session at 6:30. That's why I was asking that. I
Right,
do
that's
not
the
have
one
an
for
invitation
me.
to the closed session at the moment.
But
Right.
yeah, she'll need to send a closed session Zoom separate from the one that is the open session, unless she wants to police from 5:30. Yeah.
Yeah, so 6.1, the closed session would be 5:30, and the regular session board meeting would be 6:30.
Correct.
And then the rest of the meetings will occur as printed. Thank you for catching that, Dr. Skinner. We appreciate it. So item 7.1, no further questions, comments, concern. We will move to adjourn at 5:51 p.m.
Thank y'all for shopping with me.
Literally.
See you all tomorrow night.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you all
tomorrow
so
night.
much. Appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.